Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, welcome. Hope you're having an amazing day. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts? You get a bonus greeting on every episode. So hit that subscribe button. I am here with the man, Adam Posner. Adam, what's happening, bud?
Nick, what is happening, my dude?
Not much. So for you guys who don't know Adam, get familiar with this guy. He is like upper tier of the marketing game, upper tier of the recruiting game. You're someone I've learned a lot from. Just not upper tier of the podcast game. You're just somebody who has a great presence on LinkedIn, who I've just learned so much from over the last year. And I wanted to get you on. Yeah, see how I gas you up, dude. I just pour it out. Okay.
A lot to live up to here.
Yeah. Please live up to all this that I'm hyping. But you're somebody who is great in the recruiting space. I wanted to get you on to the this series we're doing, Open to Work, because you probably have a lot of techniques, tactics, and insights from a recruiter's perspective that we can speak into the lives of folks who might be in between jobs in the ethics and compliance game or in the HR game, on how they can accelerate toward that next position. So, I'm sure you've seen a lot over this last year. Maybe we start there. Like, how have you seen the recruiting side change? Because, when we talked last year, the power dynamics have changed a lot, right? Like when we talked last, all the power was really on the employee's perspective,
right? The candidate side.
Yeah, on the candidate side, right? They had so many options. Labor mobility was at an all-time high. The economy was like really chugging. Then COVID hit, and then it all kind of flipped. So from your standpoint, over this last year, what do you think of, what have you seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important when we look at those unemployment numbers to understand which segments are most affected. Travel, tourism, hospitality, anyone working in that restaurant industry, decimated for sure. Yeah. But when I talk specifically about my niche, which is marketing, media, and ad tech, anything to do with direct to consumer e-commerce marketing has been on fire. Absolutely on fire. I mean, one of my clients has seen 4x growth over the last 12 months. So in that specific vertical, it's still a very strong candidate-driven market. In fact, more so, which is absolutely incredible to see. So that's fantastic to see that there is hiring, but in so many other areas, it is really rough. So you have to be very cognizant about which categories and verticals that we're talking about when it comes to talking about unemployment and the market here. One of the other great trends that we're seeing right now is a lot of companies that were very firm on, we're only hiring in our market, we want people local, we want people in the office, have now been able to expand and hire remotely, which has been fantastic. If you think about it from the available talent and labor pool out there, they're able to do a couple of things. They're able to tap into folks who live in different regions, expand that talent pool. And for better or worse, hey, we could have a whole separate conversation about this. The cost of living in certain areas is less, and the salary requirements are less for those people. I'm not saying necessarily pay less for people who live in a different area, but let's be truthful about it. It costs a lot more to live in New York City, Chicago, Miami, San Francisco than it does in certain areas in the middle of the country, and compensation does reflect that in many regards.
So there's been like a new flexibility, right, on the employer side, both in terms of like the work from home or the remote piece. Absolutely. What kind of flexibility have you seen from them? Not just geographically, but in terms of like, well, I'll take somebody from a different industry, for example.
Again, it's very industry specific. And I think it depends on the role and what they're looking for. It goes back to that conversation we see on LinkedIn all the time, hire for character, train for skill. At a very high level, of course, we believe in that. We believe in hiring the right people. I take a look at the motto that you have on your wall right there. And I truly believe in all that. You hire good people for sure. But in a certain regard, you need certain skills for certain jobs. And one of the core reasons that a company right now may need to lean more on the skill side of this conversation is because they don't have the bandwidth for training. Think about this. Folks are working from home right now. In most cases, people are in an office. It's easy to shift. Hey, go sit with Nick for a little bit. Go sit with Adam for a little bit. Right. Go shadow Sarah over there and sit on our calls. That's a lot harder right now remotely. Training and onboarding is significantly harder. So a lot of companies right now, and I'm talking specifically from experience with my clients right now, like Adam, we need to have folks with these skills ready to go immediately, plug and play. Of course, we're putting our filters on for good people, good characters. That's a door open. I mean, that's like just a cost of entry, right? Yeah, that's exactly. Just, barrier. Exactly. Of course, I'm not hiring jerks off the street. Come on. But there's certain skills you need for certain jobs. And I think that conversation also kind of leans for entry level. I think at entry level jobs, there's more bandwidth and wiggle room there to hire somebody who may not have those exact skills that you need. So very careful that we put it into context when having that conversation.
So I'm talking to, or I'm helping somebody right now who had some personal challenges, and they're super smart. So again, some of the stuff we're talking about is a little bit tangential, but I think the principles are, I think they apply kind of across the board. So this person, super smart, had some personal challenges, wants to kind of do a career change from like the straight legal field into the compliance field. Okay, so this person doesn't have any like direct compliance experience. Obviously, so much of it like is related and complementary.
There's a lot of transferable skills.
Exactly. So for somebody like that, what do you talk to them about? Just like from a tactical standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, or even from a mindset standpoint, to increase their odds of like landing where they want to go?
Yeah, this is an interesting one too, and I think I hate to go in this direction, but it also starts making sure that we level set on compensation goals. Let's just say in the legal field, they're making $100,000 a year, hypothetically, and this role is at 65, 70,000. Let's align to make sure right now that this is a pivot that you are open to and can afford to do. Because it's going to be very difficult for me to introduce you to my clients saying, hey, you don't have that those hard skills that we need for this job specifically. You have a lot of those tangential skills, a lot of those transferable skills for sure, but this job pays a lot less. And you might have to take 2 steps backwards in a title and compensation perspective to make those steps forward in the long run, right? Are you willing to take that short-term loss for a long-term gain? You have to align on that point first and foremost. And then you can start to get into the conversations about how do we tell your career story? How do we tell the story about why you want to pivot? Let's highlight those transferable skills and why specifically you want to make the move into this industry.
So that's a great point. Like in a hierarchy of needs or a hierarchy of priorities, there's only one thing in each spot.
Maslow's recruiting pyramid. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he did it. He did it everywhere.
Yeah.
But I see that sometimes with folks who are like, oh, I want to do that. I want to get over there, but I also want the money at the same time. So it's like, you have to pick one or the other, and you have to make that prioritization.
It's about, let's just be realistic. Let's be pragmatic, people. Like, let's have a real conversation, black and white. There's not a lot of gray area here. Like, why me as a company am I going to go give you the same compensation of somebody who's been doing exactly what you're trying to do for their whole career? I mean, let's just call it what it is. I don't care how awesome of a human you are. I mean, this is a job. I need things done. We have certain things that we need to have for this specific role. And you unfortunately don't have that level of experience. There's another key word that's really important here. And I think this comes down to storytelling and making sure that comes clear, is aptitude, right? I have the ability to learn quickly. I have the ability to pick up these skills quickly, and giving examples of how you do that. I could talk smack all day long. Hey, Nick, I pick things up super quickly. I could learn on the fly. I'm real quick at that. Okay, give me an example of that. If I call your former supervisor, will he tell me the same thing?
Right.
Right. You have
as like a defining characteristic of you.
Right. If you're saying that, if you're coming into a certain, because that's a big piece too. If you're doing that career pivot, you need to use that word aptitude, but you also have to prove it out.
Got it. And how do you see folks do that? Sort of anecdotally, reference, both?
Both. It has to be a combination of both, and it really has to come through. Listen, it also goes to that conversation too. Some people are just great interviewers. I know there's points in my career where I could come in and charm the pants off someone in an interview, and then the real good interviewers would turn it around and give me those real hard behavioral questions, and they want to see it there too. But then there's some others. I've talked my way into jobs, maybe at a higher level that I should have been at. And when that happens, you're setting up both sides for failure.
Interesting. Yeah. And so where do you draw that line between sort of aspirational stretch position, where, hey, I can do this, and when are you biting off more than you can chew? It's hard to probably know.
Nick, I've always wanted to be an astronaut, and I can tell you, man, I feel it, man. I've watched all those space videos. I've seen all those sci-fi movies. I tell you, just put me in that cockpit, put me in that seat. I'm telling you, I could fly that spaceship. Right. Like
you got the job. That's why I don't work at NASA. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I'm obviously, a little far-fetched here, but you have to have quantifiable results in your story that show how you've grown. Maybe it's like, hey, listen, Nick, in my last role, right there was the director 2 levels above me left. She just up and quit, and they didn't have anybody. I stepped into that role, and yes, there was a bit of a learning curve there. Yes, there was some things I didn't know, but I did it really quickly. And I moved up so fast in there that our clients were satisfied. I picked up those new skills that I needed. I needed to do X, Y, and Z in this role. And by by being in this company for a couple of years and watching that director do that, I was able to pick it up. And you could ask my last boss how that was. Right? Like you have to do that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of like that example anecdote. There's a lot of credibility in it because you talked about a J curve, you talked about the struggle, and then you also said you can ask this person and they'll attest to the same thing. That's so much, I think, of what that sale is. And go ahead.
Yeah, you said the word sale, and it is a sale, an interview, a job. The job search is a sales process. That's another really important thing to think about. And if you treat it like that, you'll have much greater success. Think about a good, true sales process.
Yeah, and so in a lot of the space that you're in, I think people get that maybe at a deeper DNA level or something, right? Like if you're in
Sales and marketing, yeah, it's a function.
You're dealing with hearts and minds. You're dealing with storytelling and those kinds of things, and even probably on a product level, maybe at a bit of a diminished thing, but like for something that's really kind of back office, that's HR, that's more like HR, that's more like compliance, where that's not really part and parcel with like how they came up. Like a lot of these folks came up through legal, or they came up through, you know, some of these back office things. How do you get somebody who who's never really thought of it as a sale? How do you get them to start like getting those gears to mesh and kind of turning on the light bulb for them to get some traction down that path? Because that's really kind of what it takes, you know?
I think you turn the conversation into storytelling, and you start to talk to them about, instead of being so linear and prescriptive with talking about your background, tell it as a story. And I think it comes down to, and I'll take it back a little bit. I was at American Express 2011, 2012. And I've told the story before, how it just wasn't right for me from a culture perspective. It wasn't, you know, and luckily I got very lucky. The fact that after a year plus there, they brought in a new president and he changed the organization, and everybody had to re-interview for their jobs. And I'm like, that's BS. I've already gone through the gauntlet here out there, and I decided to take the exit package. It was fantastic. My wife was, you know, a month or so away from having our daughter at the time, and I took the package. I mean, it was healthcare for a year and 6 months severance and all that kind of stuff too. But the other thing that they offered, which was critical, was outplacement services. And there was a number of us that did not take this opportunity. I'm like, hey, I'm sitting here for 3 weeks anyway. I know my end date. I know when I'm leaving here. I'm like, why not? Why shouldn't I take advantage of this? And I was lucky enough to work with a career counselor, and she taught me one of the most valuable pieces in any job search, which is the elevator pitch, which is your story. And so we worked, you know, it was a little long wind to get there, but
no, this is great. This is where I wanted to go next.
Yeah. Sorry, so we worked on this elevator pitch, which is your story. Because the first question in almost every single job interview is, tell me about yourself. Tell me your story. And if you can't go in there and be succinct and strategic in your story and lead it, because that's your opportunity. That's your opportunity to set the stage, man, right? Like, you're able to come in there. And we worked on this for 3 weeks. And she worked me, and she made me redraft it and write it. And like, I literally have copies of it, man. And it's great because I'm able to tell who I am, what I do best, what my skills are, what my current situation is, and what I'm looking for in about 90 seconds.
Amazing.
And I'm always, ever since that day, since 2012, throughout my career, I take that exact story and I tweak it to the next role, to the next opportunity, to the current events happening right now. But it's that skill set, the ability to craft that story. That's an offer. I'm going to see if I can find that paperwork and send it over to you.
I'd love to see that. We're doing, we have a session for this group that I'm a part of where we're helping folks, you know, with their transition and stuff like that. And a big portion of this session is going to be about the elevator pitch. And I'll just echo everything you said. I feel like when you know, jobs I've gotten in the past, when we were fundraising, even now when we're selling our services, there's such an opportunity to just condense it all down, boil it down to a couple of takeaways. And really, I kind of find the fact that, I mean, tell me what you think about this. I think most people stink at interviewing. They're not really good at it. And I think that creates a tremendous opportunity for a candidate to help guide them through that interview and give them the hooks to hold on to.
Interviewing's tough, man. And some people are just naturals at it because it's a very, you know, extroverted kind of process. And some people just, the anxiety and the fear and the unknown, and you're layering on, either I'm out of work and I'm trying to get a job and this is so important that I crush this. They don't know how to respond to body language. And we're talking about in-office interviews. We're not even talking about the last, 11 months here.
Right.
It's stressful. Interviews are stressful. And then you throw into the mix, there are some interviewers out there, you've been in front of them, they're just like, these guys are literally like, you're in front of the freaking Supreme Court, right? And they're grilling you and everything. And then there's other people who literally walk into the interview and they just got your resume in their hand. They haven't even looked, and they're just like, All right. Hey, Nick. Hey, nice to meet you, man. Tell me, what's up, man? Who are you? What do you do there? Right. And those are you have to be able to take advantage of both of those opportunities, because you know,
Correct.
if you're coming in to a behavioral interview, you're going to have that skill set, right? You know, all right, here are the questions they're going to type to ask me. Here's how I'm going to position it. You know, I'm going to use the STAR method, right? I'm going to use, right, I'm going to have quantifiable results. I'm going to be able to use antidotes in there and then back it up with numbers. And on the flip side, when I come in and I have that freaking softball coming at me, when this interviewer is not prepared, I'm going to take advantage and I am going to lead the narrative in that interview, because the ultimate goal of any interview is to get to the next level of that interview process. Remember that. How do I get from this round to the next round?
And that's really what the resume is doing, right? The resume is
Resume is a
just
door, the resume is a door opener, correct?
That's right. Where do you see people put that emphasis? So, I mean, you're obviously great at this. I think, obviously spot on, right? We're playing a lily pad game. We're hopping to the next opportunity, and you just have to kind of get through that next one. How have you seen people who don't understand the sort of linear progression of that interview process place sort of incorrect, for lack of a better term, incorrect weight on the resume, for example, or the cover letter or whatever?
Well, it's really interesting too. I mean, here's kind of my stance on cover letters. If you're applying for a job that you're spot on for, and we're talking, you're checking 75, 80% of the boxes, it's in your industry, it's the next level up, you're in that same competitive set, don't even bother with a cover letter. I've seen cover letters hurt people, and it's careless mistakes. I kind of call it like a 3-strike rule. If I see a cover letter for somebody and they're a great candidate on paper, and that cover letter, they forget to change the name of the company, right? They say, "Dear Acme Industries," but we're really talking NHP Talent Group. I'm like, that's a careless strike. You didn't take that 1 second there. That's a strike. It's not an out. It's a strike.
Okay.
And I'm going to remember that. So you have to be very mindful with cover letters. I've seen people leave their cover letters in there that is so irrelevant and just wrong. Like, they're literally just copying and pasting it, and it's just lazy. So you have to be very mindful of the cover letter. The cover letter should be used if you're talking about a career pivot, if you're using it as a gap in unemployment. The cover letter should never reflect and be a mirror of your resume, because then you're giving me double the work to do. Why are you telling me everything in your cover letter? I'm just going to look in your resume in 2 seconds. So be very mindful about the copy. I don't want to get too much into a cover letter exercise here, because I'm not a tremendous fan of cover letters, right? But use it to explain a situation. Hey, I took the last year off to raise my kid. I took the last 6 months off for a sick relative. My husband and I decided to take a year off and travel the world. I'm like, that's awesome, man. Now we have something to talk about in the interview, because I think that's interesting.
Right.
But use a cover letter if you need to explain something. Don't use it to mirror your resume. It's a waste of everyone's time.
And, you know, what you're kind of talking about is a little bit of empathy for the person. I mean, again, this is just salesmanship, right? Like, I need to be, if you're going to be interviewing me, I need to be concerned about kind of your experience, so to speak, right? I don't want to, you just said that just doubles my work. Like, if I'm not thinking about that, if I'm just thinking about myself and I'm just, I just got to do a scatter shot here, I'm going to send him a tome and I'm going to send him this and I'm going to send him that. Like, it ends up kind of working against you.
And then you think about the length too. I mean, I've seen, like, I literally, because I mean, I look at a lot of resumes every single day that come through applications. Some of them are just eye charts, man. I mean, when I'm talking about the resume, I'm talking about a cover letter. If I literally see a dissertation there, like, you know, it's the Odyssey in front of me, like, I don't want to read it, right? I'm just like, the paragraphs aren't broken up. I'm like, that's not thoughtful about the end user. And the same thing applies to the resume too. I mean, some people try to cram, they hear the rule like, oh, don't, you know, resume shouldn't be, you know, more than 2 pages. And the only way it should be more than 2 pages if you're a PhD and you're listing, you know, all your publications and all your work and all your experiments and everything. I'm like, yeah, I've seen that. And I've also seen people like reduce their resume down to a 6-point font. And I have to sit there with the monocle, you know, with the jeweler's loop trying to like freaking read this thing. Right. And I'm like, no. Like, when it comes down to the resume, it really comes down to the story you're telling, being relevant, calling out those relevant. And I tell people, customize your resume. Don't lie about it. We'll suss that out real quick from a skills perspective. Don't lie on it. But if you have a skill that they're really looking for in that job description, in the job advert, pump it up. Move it to that first bullet point, because that's the first thing I'm going to see, right? If I'm looking for, you know, lead compliance, and I say lead compliance at your competitor. Excellent. Great. Let's get on the phone quickly. You just saved me time. I see it. You work for this company. You did what I'm looking for. You're what I need. Let's talk and work through the rest of it.
That's a great point.
Put the effort in.
Yeah, put the effort in. And I mean, you know, again, just, I think this corollary to a sales pitch is so apt, right? You're not, like, when you're pitching your services to a potential client, like, yeah, you may have a similar structure of, hey, I'm going to cover these kinds of things and I'm going to show that I have these capabilities and these technologies and stuff
Right.
like that. But it's not like you put a tape recorder up to the mic and you just sort of sit back and it's just like, you know what I'm saying? You're not
Yeah.
just pressing play, you're responding to what they're looking
And
for. I mean, this naturally happens in a conversation. And I think
it
if people
does.
could take that same care for their resume, they probably would be a little bit more successful.
They would too. And for me, like I know when I was on the job hunt and I was going from agency side, and let me just backtrack for a second. Before I got into recruiting, I worked 15 years in advertising and marketing. So I've worked brand side. I've worked at companies, we call it brand side. I've worked at American Express. I've worked at Sirius XM satellite radio. And then I've worked agency side, working at an ad agency. So when I was going from one job to the next, I actually had two different versions of my resume. If I was applying to another ad agency, I pumped up a lot of those agency skills, the client management, the communication, all those kind of keyword pieces there. But if I was applying to a brand, I would flip it around. Manage the client relationship with these brand managers. Like those are really important points there too. So they could really understand, like, all right, Adam worked on the agency side. His relationships on the brand side were with senior brand leaders, and that's the type of role he's applying to. And these are highly relatable skills. He has that insight. He knows what they're looking for, and he can bring that to the table.
I mean, it's just kind of making it easy
Common
for them.
sense.
Yeah,
Also,
it is kind of common
people are
sense.
lazy though, Nick.
What's that?
I think people are lazy, like straight up. I think that I think it's a combination of not being mindful about it and why conversations like this are important to bring it to the forefront. And then I think, in the advent of the easy apply button, and I blame Staples for this, right? Didn't they start that easy button?
They
I
did,
blame
yeah.
LinkedIn, right? With the easy apply button, where it's turned into a spray and pray. And I think that's, I could go off on a tangent here about how that's flooded the applicant process. I mean, I can't even tell you, man, like we'll put up a role with one of my clients, project manager. Now, project manager is a super generic job title. That could apply to every single freaking industry in the world. You could be a project manager at a factory. You could be a project manager in a surgical supply company. You could be a project manager in an ad agency, right? But once you start to read that job description and you see what company it's for, that narrows it down really quickly.
Yeah.
You'd be shocked, man. Let's just say I put out a job ad on LinkedIn for an easy apply with an easy apply button, flooded.
Unreal.
Flooded. So it's
How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? Like
lots of drinking, man. No.
Yeah, a lot of booze. Yeah. Day drinking. One thing we've started to do is we have the whole description and then we have some directions on the bottom that are off LinkedIn or off Indeed, wherever it's posted. Like they have to go and fill something out over here or do a test or something over there. And then we're only looking at people who actually follow those directions to kind of weed out that.
Well, that's smart, right?
I don't even know if it works though. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's knockout questions too. Like a lot of the things that we put on a resume, for example, if we can't support sponsorship, if it's a geo specific job there too. And the geo specific is kind of weird though, because you might have someone, let's just say it's a New York role and they live on the West Coast. That's when you do in the cover letter, hey, I live out in LA. My family's in New York. I'm looking to move to New York. Great. That's a great thing to add in a cover letter. I get it. I'm not going to disqualify you right away. Like that's an important thing to put in a cover letter. You know what I'm saying? But the application process, and I urge people really read the job descriptions. Don't be lazy about it. Because a lot of people put blame. Listen, the recruitment process is broken, but I think both sides need to take responsibility for it. And I think that job seekers applying to roles that they're 100% irrelevant for is a big problem. I talk openly about it.
There's this subreddit called Recruiting Hell. Have you ever seen this?
I have, and it's one of those things like Glassdoor. I just don't put too much time or effort into it.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's just a bitch fest, right?
That's exactly what it is. It's just people complaining, and I can kind of appreciate both sides because I've been looking for jobs in the past, and now we're growing, we're hiring people, and a lot of the complaining is just like, well, what do you expect? What do you expect from these people?
I apply, no one gets back to me, right? We're flooded, man. And then also companies are going, I don't mean to cut you off, but like companies and resources in this day and age, they're cutting back, they're furloughing, and a typical recruiter's workload could have been 7 to 8 active roles, and now they have 12 to 13 because, right? What do you expect when you're applying for jobs that you have no business applying for? Yeah, but it's weird though too, right? It's a weird thing too, because let's take a few steps back on that.
Okay.
It's almost like I can't discount an aspirational job seeker, right? I know I'm a salty, cynical New Yorker recruiter here, but let's take a step back. We've all been in those positions too, where there's aspirational jobs, and I understand sometimes when people just want to take a moonshot, like they want to take that moonshot, and I can't always fault them for that until I'm the one on the other side reviewing applications. I'm like, it's like me applying for being an astronaut. Delete in 2 seconds.
Right.
Where people really, and people say this all the time. I have to be careful how I say this. Nick, I could scan a resume in 5 to 8 seconds. My eye is trained to be able to scan for certain things in that resume and say, hey, this is somebody I either want to continue reading a little bit deeper and put that minute or two in, or immediately, like an immediate hit that reject button.
As you describe that, man, like, you know how you were saying, hey, the resume is just going to get you in the door. That interview is just going to get you to the next one. There is a bunch of mini micro sales that are happening just on the resume. That's what you just described. Am I going to pay attention?
Passive.
Should I pay attention to this and should I dive deeper? We got to get that right off the bat. What kind of things are like, do you automatically just go crap, garbage?
It's so
aside
crazy
from
though,
like
and
just
I
stupid
hate
typos
this.
and stuff.
I hate. Well, typos are there's no excuse for. Dude, I've missed typos in resumes that I'm reviewing, and a hiring manager will call me on that. They're like, "How'd you send me this resume? And there's typos in it." I'm like, "Uh-oh,
My bad.
my bad." Right? Like, oops.
Even
'Cause I'm
dash sizes. Are you doing M dashes everywhere? Are you doing N dashes?
consistency, right? And if it's an attention to detail role and your M dashes versus, other like it's just, not right. That's attention to detail, and
Right.
certain hiring managers will pick up on that. But you have to start with the optics of a resume. I always tell people, clean, clear, concise. Is it something, treat it as almost an ad? Is it something aesthetically that I want to look at? I don't need you to wow me with floral designs and graphs. I don't want to see your picture in it, because that we could have a whole separate conversation about bias there too. Because there
I'd
is
love
a
to hear
bias,
about that. That's great.
right? Like,
There's a big debate about that. Yeah.
don't ever put your photograph in there. If I want to look you up on LinkedIn, I will, but you could do yourself a lot of harm there too. Right? Because you have no idea what the person on the other end is going to. We all have biases. I don't care who you are. I'm not just saying this in a racist way, whatever. We all have subconscious biases. We're human.
Right.
We're brought up in different ways. We all have things subtle or not so subtle. But if you're a job seeker, you want to take that out of the equation as quickly as possible. I mean, we're even talking biases of a foreign sounding name, right? I mean, some companies completely autonomize a resume, and they'll take out names and they'll just have a job number, a candidate number. I've seen a lot of companies do that successfully, right? They blind it out. They blind it out. Yeah, they do. And the software too that you could layer on top of your ATS that does that too. There are companies out there that does that to remove a lot of that subconscious bias. But you have to do everything in your power to make your resume clean, clear, and concise. Now, if you're a graphic designer, if you're in product marketing or management, right, and there might be a little bit of like kind of that graphic edge to it, a tad, a touch, a little bit of flair here and there, but readability is key. Clean, clear, concise. I mean, I've seen people where they have, they literally turn the resume into 3 columns. On the left side, they're listing all their job skills. On the right, they're using some kind of dotted graph, and they're leaving only like a little bit of room for their actual role. And that's like, it's just not thoughtful. I don't know who's giving this advice, but I always err on the side of clean, clear, and relevant. I mean, I made a post about it the other day. Like, just be straight up with it. Like, it's about the what's in there.
Yeah, what's in there. How have you seen people like successfully? Well, first of all, is this even important? That thing, the golden circle, right? Like what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. I think we resonate closely on our whys. How have you seen people successfully incorporate that why or incorporate some of their heart and their differentiation to help kind of augment that just sort of straight skill set? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a great one too. And I see that too in the cover letter sometimes, right? If it's a creative cover letter, if you make me laugh in a cover letter, I already like you.
Okay.
But if you waste my time in a cover letter, I don't like you. I mean, it's kind of, it's kind of the way I go there. It's always interesting how folks use the real estate at the top. Some use an objective, some use the word summary. What are you putting there? Right. But I like it when someone tells me what they're looking for. Like, I'm currently a director in this field looking to make the next step up to this level. Great.
It helps frame it for you.
It helps frame it. Just help me frame it up there. But if you're wasting that space there, just be cognizant of what you're putting in there and the end user. It goes back to what you said before, Nick. Be mindful of the reader, and the reader being the internal recruiter.
Yeah. And you were kind of talking about kind of the thoughtfulness. And as I'm picturing, one of these resumes I looked at recently that looked like freaking, you kind of described it, 6-point font, freaking everything.
It's an eye chart. It's just an eye chart, right? Like you're the eye doctor and you have to like cover one eye, right? Like, what does that say on row 18? You're like, right?
You're like, I'm not even going to read this. But then also it kind of speaks to sort of a lack of thoughtfulness. Like part of being a good writer, for example, is knowing what not to write about. And part of being a good filmmaker is knowing what you can cut out, right?
It's the blank spaces, my friend. It's the white spaces that make a huge difference.
Exactly. Right.
Those pauses.
It's the pause. Yeah. Perfect. So it just ends up, when people want to have this sort of completeness and say, well, I guess got to have it all on there and, just so that they all know it. I think it does 2 things. It first of all, shows like maybe a lack of thoughtfulness on the one hand. You don't know what matters. And then on the other hand, there's also no like mystery left. There's no cachet left, or there's no like there's no mystique left. Like at some level, you want to have something to talk about in the conversation. And that's why, I think sometimes when you put something, like you said in the cover letter, we just traveled, or I love skiing, or whatever, gives you something to talk about and to humanize. But where do you see people go wrong with that?
Being too open.
Oh,
I mean, I rarely see that. It's either you're not being mindful and editing out for the previous company that you just applied to, that you're putting something irrelevant, that you're putting something that I could read in your resume, if you're just mirroring that resume, or maybe oversharing.
got it.
I have 32 cats at home.
Yeah, you're like, ooh, your house smells
Crazy
like
cat lady, right? Yeah, we don't need that. You're gonna come and smell like cat all day. Yeah, I'm allergic, right?
Exactly.
Just be mindful, right? Like there's a delicate balance, and especially in this world of oversharing,
Totally.
and everyone preaching to be more open, be more, to an extent, right? There's some things
there's
you
a
should,
line. There's still a line.
keep quiet about.
So let me ask you this. So when I'm getting super tactical here. So
Yeah, go for it.
rubber meets the road here. Like do you like a resume that's more like, I had this position and these are my skills, and I had this position, these are my skills? Or, I mean, I've seen some other ones that are like, hey, these are the things that I'm good at, and these are the things my experiences, and it's sort of more of a block of sort of experience, and then sort of just a list of experience of like jobs. You know what I'm saying?
All right, so it's interesting too. I on a personal note, I like when someone kind of takes that story approach, and I've seen it even visually with a timeline, which I don't really love. And I could kind of see from a linear perspective there too, versus kind of the vertical. Well,
Okay.
the horizontal versus the vertical.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I think when I'm in the zone and I'm reviewing resumes and I know what I'm looking for, my eyes kind of trained to just keep scanning through them and seeing a progression and seeing it in a way that my eyes kind of trained for it. So when I see something that stands out, and yes, if you're relevant and now you're causing me to stand out for a second, it's going to cause me to disrupt my viewing pattern. If you think a little bit like that, but it has to be relevant. If it's not, if it's garbage, I'm going to get pissed, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting that the storytelling resume, and I don't know, I could go either way on that. It just kind of depends on the role, the day, and the candidate, and what that resume looks like.
Yeah. And
if you tell me the cat in the hat story, if you're telling me if you're using a haiku or a limerick or something, I'm like, this person's crazy. You're being overly creative for the sake of it, and this is a compliance role. This isn't a creative writer at an ad agency.
Right.
Something else to think about.
That's a great point. Yeah, you got to kind of go for the job you want. And then what's interesting about compliance is that it's kind of like this circulatory system for an organization. So, compliance and HR exists in manufacturing companies and in, technology companies and so forth.
Right.
How have you seen people in these types of roles that kind of exist irrespective of like industry type?
Right. Like a controller, right? Like a controller
yes.
could come and sit in a different company, right? Kind of that back of house.
Yeah. How do you see them sort of, how important is it to sort of cater to the stereotypes of the industry, or is it not important at all?
Well, I mean, it's really job specific there too, because if I'm a controller coming from a manufacturing company coming over to an ad agency, there's different nuances to that role. Okay. And those are the parts that you have to call out. But you could also call out the similarities. Like, listen, in manufacturing, we have vendors, and in ad agency, you have vendors. So it's a similar transaction. So I understand the transaction part of it too. So you have to make it relatable.
So I want to circle back real quick to the elevator pitch, because I think it is literally perhaps the most powerful sort of concentrated tool to frame out a conversation, to frame out who you are. You can incorporate your why into that and so forth. When you were going through that what is it called? Out services or whatever?
Outplacement.
Outplacement services. Like, you had a bunch of iterations with that coach on building that, that pitch. And I'm sure your final product, which is obviously a work in process, probably different.
It's a live document. Yeah.
It's a live document. Great. Yeah.
So to speak.
Put. How did you what light bulbs went on in that process where you're like, okay, I get what this is supposed to be?
Because it was very simple. How does a written word translate when you're standing in front of a mirror or reading it to somebody else? And that's a hard skill for people, because I write, just because of the way I'm wired, I write the way I speak, and some people do it the opposite. So it kind of came naturally for me when I was putting my thoughts on paper, how I'd be saying it to somebody else. I'm a
Got
born
it.
and raised New Yorker, spent 15 years working in marketing and advertising. 7 years ago, I had a career epiphany. I say it the way I write it the way it is, but a lot of people can't do that. So that's why that coach is important, to help you reframe it and have that down there too. And then there's also choice of action words. The words are very specific. Pivot, left. Like, did I leave the company? Did I get fired? How do you explain being fired? How do you explain
Yeah.
being let go? Right? How do you be truthful to these things? How do you not glaze over certain important pieces there too?
How,
It's a lot of touch.
it is a lot of touch. And again, I mean, again, we're talking about human nature and we're talking about influence and persuasion. And that's really what it
It's
takes for someone.
sales. It's sales,
It's
man. We were just
sales.
talking about this. I'm pitching. It's a sales pitch. I'm coming in. I'm trying to sell myself to you, man.
Yeah. And to be successful in that is inherently you need in others focus. You know what I'm saying? Like I have to be talking to you about what I think you're going to care about, not necessarily what I care about or
Right.
what my mom cares about. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Like I know, and that's the other piece too that I was taught. You have to be able to adapt that elevator pitch to be specific for that listener, that job, that company. What's those key words for them? Like if I know this company is super high on like philanthropy or something, that's something I want to kind of weave in there, right? I want to drop a buzzword in there. You kind of want to make those kind of flags, but be truthful, right? Like I'm not going to talk about being philanthropic when I haven't contributed a dime to anyone in my life, right? Like you need to be truthful about it.
How have you seen people's mindsets when they've been let go or downsized or whatever really end up being like an anchor around their neck?
Oh, I mean, that's my life story. And that's something that I've had my career story, not my life story. It's something I've had to live with. I've been in my early part of my career, there was a period of 10 years where I was either let go, fired, or downsized 4 roles in a row.
Oh, wow.
And I carried that weight around with me a long time, and not just emotionally and almost like a defeatist syndrome, but I've also had to be able to articulate and explain that with every role I was going into. And there were definitely parts, I'll be honest, man, there was definitely parts probably where I bullshitted a little bit, where maybe I kind of, changed the optics on it too. But I was also taught about optics. Optics are important because you don't want to be untruthful, but you also want to be able to spin a story in your direction there too.
Good point. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I'm not going to tell somebody to say, if you got fired, it's let go. What happened there? Listen, it wasn't the right fit. And that's the truth, right? I mean, listen, unless you're getting kicked out of a company for doing something illegal or something, listen, the majority of people have gotten let go in their life, in their career. Let's just call it what it is. It happens in life, right? I mean, I've lost my job because we lost accounts and 30 people in the agency have gotten let go. I've lost my job because of performance. I talk about it all the time. I lost my job at Vayner because I didn't do what they hired me to do. And therefore they made the decision to let me go. There's been other parts too when companies have decreased size, right? There's been attrition. There's been other, there's times when I left jobs. You just have to be able to articulate it and put the right spin on it without glazing too much over it. And you also have to be mindful of a pattern. That's something else that I had to struggle with a bit too. When somebody who's actually pretty astute and looking, so you were here for 6 months and you jumped to this for 9 months, you were there for a year and a half, 2 years here. I'm noticing a pattern here. I really haven't spent a lot of time in each one of these roles. What happened? Right. And that was something I had to struggle with too. And that was a big reason too why I decided to pivot and follow my passion.
Yeah. And I think, you need to always be ready with an answer at some level. It needs to be a credible one that's not cloaked in so much insecurity that it's going to come across kind of cringy. But I think we also have to recognize that the person on the other side, they don't have all the information about us as candidates. They're trying to sort through it and trying to see, like, does this matter? Do I need to pay attention to this? And also they have a job to do themselves, right?
Like due diligence, right? They need to make sure that they're not hiring somebody who's a poor performer. Right. And it's tough too, because a lot of states, like you're not allowed to ask if you're doing a reference check why someone left the job. They can only give you, from compliance, they can only ask you the dates of employment. They can't ask for a specific reason. However, never underestimate the back channel. Never underestimate. I will tell you this as a recruiter, we back channel all day long. We are connected. And especially if we're in that industry, I could go on LinkedIn right now and pull up a company that someone's working at and pull up 32 people that work there. And good bet that I'm going to know someone well enough. I could be like, yo, hey, Nick, I'm interviewing Sue over here. What was it like to work with her? Listen, Sue's terrible. Red flag, stay away from her. I'm like, Sue's awesome. She's great. I would hire her in a second right now. Boom. Right. And I'll tell you something truthful. If I get one of those red flags, I am always going to go for a second and third opinion,
Oh, you
because
are.
I really truly believe that you also have to, and this is kind of the cynical New Yorker. I mean, some people have it out for people. Sometimes it's personal
True.
conflicts at company, right? Maybe you rub somebody the wrong way in a meeting once and you have it out for them. You have to, it's human nature, man. That's the biggest thing with
Great
talent and
advice.
recruiting, that this is not a mathematical equation. It is human touch, human feel, intuition, right?
Yeah,
Like there's a
and
lot of these
which is an
pieces that make it
opportunity.
such an interesting, it's an opportunity as well too. If you know what you're getting into, if you know the game and you know the rules, how do you manipulate it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for analytical folks who maybe, again, just a lot of the folks in the industry that I'm in, they're, this is a broad brushstroke, but it's very analytical and factual, objective, and stuff like that. But there's such a human element to it. And just understanding it and being able to take advantage of it, I think is a phenomenal skill. What parting advice would you have for somebody who is kind of beating their head against the wall? They've been out of work for 6 months. They are, maybe losing a little bit of steam on their outreach. They're just kind of degrading to just hitting the
Yeah, I've been
freaking
there, man.
add to apply button.
I mean, my longest stretch out of work was about 7 months during a downturn recession, and it was tough. There were some dark days.
Totally.
We were living in the city at the time, New York City. The rent is incredibly expensive. My wife, luckily, is an attorney who was making a good living, but the burden was on her. We were living off
Yeah,
one salary, and that put a lot of emotional weight on me too. And there's a lot of pride in that.
totally.
I'm the husband, I'm the man, I'm the, I mean, I'm being serious about it, right? Like,
I'm with you.
like I wasn't providing, and it hurt, but I knew that I owed her something. I knew I owed my family something. I knew I owed myself something. And that's what drove me, because I had that North Star that I was going for. But it could be, it's tough to get rejection after rejection,
Totally.
being applying for jobs, not hearing, going for a phone interview and not hearing back. And that's why ghosting hurts so much, and why I've been on the other side, and why I make it a point to follow up with every single candidate that I actually engage with. Listen, if you apply and you're not relevant, you're going to get that automatic rejection button from me, right? But if we have a phone conversation, I'm going to close the loop on you. So getting back to your original question, it really comes down, it comes down to just that mindset and treating the job search like a job. You're going to show up every day. You're going to give it your best, and you're going to put everything out there. What's also important, though, when you're in this job search, is that you do take that mental time for yourself, right? You have
Mm,
an opportunity in between jobs. I mean, let's just call it 80% of that free time I'm going to be job searching, but 20% of the time, maybe I'll do something that I couldn't normally do when I was working. Maybe I'll spend more time at the gym. Maybe I'll pick up that hobby. Maybe I'll
mm,
go, read more. Maybe I'll do something with that, because that'll kind of help you focus and be a little bit of a reward, that little bit of a carrot at the end of the stick. So you have to trick your mind sometimes. Some of these like kind of mind tricks, they work, man. I know one of the things that I did, I at the time I was living in the city too. I would do a lot of walks in Central Park. I really enjoyed going out there with my camera and getting back to photography, something that I love to do. And I would just
mhm.
take those walks. I would take conference calls with my headphones on. I would do things like that just to be a kind of, outside. I'd really take in the city. I found myself sometimes, one time I went to a museum, I go to a bookstore. Like I would just kind of like take advantage a little bit of that downtime and just be present and observe what's happening and put some faith out into the universe. I know this sounds a little bit, kind of, wishy-washy, but it's the truth, man. Speaking from my
It is the
experience from the
truth.
heart.
And I think to that point, like if you're not balanced, if you're so myopic on it and you're just soaking in the rejection and the negativity, and you wake up and you're in front of the computer and you go to sleep, and the laptop is still open and you don't get any of that balance,
You're just
that
staring at your phone,
desperation,
refreshing. Did I get that email yet?
I mean, that desperation reeks, and the
You know,
desperation comes through a Zoom meeting, by the way. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it does. It does. And it's interesting. I kind of, I balance that out too with candidates. I take most first screens over the phone too, because I want to give someone a little bit of that like wiggle room to not have to be intimidated. And then, but I let them know, hey, the next call with the hiring manager is going to be a video call. Right. And I think it takes a lot of that, out of there. The other piece too is being organized. And I talk about this all the time.
Okay.
It kind of tapped into a little bit of my OCD, my non-diagnosed OCD. I had a spreadsheet. I was making sure I was following up. I know every role, where I'm at in the process here, just being mindful. And that kind of put me into a rhythm of, having that to-do list every day. So in the morning, I'm going to do my follow-ups. Or in the morning, I'm going to spend an hour on Indeed and LinkedIn. I'm going to network. I'm going to look at open jobs. I'm going to cross-reference. I'm going to do my follow-ups. I'm going to take a look at my cover letter. I'm going to, all these things, you just treat it like a job.
Yeah, you treat it like so I love that thing that you just said. And as you're talking about this spreadsheet, I'm just kind of visualizing, like, you treated that like a job. You treated finding a job like that was your job. And, I'm kind of picturing this thing like there's 1,000 ways up a mountain. And if we're talking about a job hunt in the context of the human element and the fact that, I just have to sell you on it, there's 1,000 different ways that I can convey who I am. So just in being consistent on your follow-up, not being obnoxious about it, but those are other touch points of interaction that can convey information about yourself. You know what I mean?
Here's 3 rules. I call it Posner's 3 Ps that I apply to everything in sales and follow-up, everything that I did on the job search, everything I do now: patient, polite, persistence. Patience, polite, persistence. I mean, I literally had a job seeker last week. Well, a couple of weeks ago, she applied. We had a phone call. I told her I was going to review it with the hiring manager. She followed up with me every single day, to the point where I'm like, you need to chill. Like, I'm telling you, the team is in the middle of something. You have an interesting background. We're going to look at it. Like, chill. On the flip side of it, you also have to know that this person might be out of work. They could be having demands, financial demands at home too. But there's a balance there. You have to understand. I think 48 hours is a good kind of rule of thumb, so to speak, for a follow-up. I can't get mad at somebody if I haven't gotten back to them in 48 hours. Check in with me in 48 hours. I think that's fair.
Yeah. So you would like, she wasn't messing up on persistence there. It was kind of a polite violation. Yeah.
Patience.
Oh, it was a patience violation. Okay. Right.
She was very polite about it. Every one of her emails were polite. It was just the frequency of them. And then it kind of got to me too. I'm like, all right, chill, chill, chill out.
Yeah. And I think it's just human to fill in any gaps of a story that you don't know. Like, it's just kind of natural to fill it in with negatives. So it's like, what are you, a psychopath? Like, stop emailing me. I told you yesterday, I'll get back to you at the end of the week or whatever. You can convey negative stuff as well.
And I think one of the things that I do as a recruiter too, knowing that, is I'm always managing expectations, and I'm very clear. Like, if it's a Monday, I'll say, hey, listen, I'm going to be straight up with you. We're not going to know anything till later this week.
Right.
Like, and then I'm very good at following up and everything there too.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, this was way better than I was hoping. So I love the takeaways.
Under promise, over deliver.
See, look at you. You just do it on every front, don't you? Yes. But yeah, everyone, how can people find you? How can people watching this who might want to utilize you and your services, which I would highly recommend? How can they get at you?
Yeah, absolutely. You could find me on LinkedIn, Adam J. Posner. You could find the business side at nhptalentgroup.com. And if anybody wants to check out the podcast, it's real simple, thepodcast.com.
Yeah. And please, subscribe to that, dude. You have had so many phenomenal guests. If the ethics experts could somehow one day ascend to the status of the podcast, I will pat myself on the back and be a success.
Stop it, man. You're awesome, and you have a great show here. And it's something to actually talk about too. It's niche. I love these niche podcasts. They're great. You and I are not going to be the next Joe Rogan, but we're speaking to a specific audience with actionable value add content. And as long as we know that, as long as we're not going for the zillions of downloads and followers, that's fine, because we're adding value along the way.
I just want to help, man. I just want to help. So appreciate you, man. This is a lot of fun, bro. Have a good day.
You too.